Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today, we're covering a brand new and super fun way to play Paladin. A fully charisma-based Paladin, which in a doomed attempt to connect with the youth, I'm calling the RIZZADIN. Now we've all seen that you can use multiclassing with Pact of the Blade Warlock in order to set your character's attacks to charisma, and if you multiclass Paladin and Warlock, then you can attack with your Charisma, use smites, have extremely powerful spellcasting, because your Charisma can be as high as possible, and solve a lot of the problems that Paladin as a class has, by only requiring one attribute to be high, instead of Paladin, which is very multi-attribute dependent. This is a super powerful way to play the character, because it focuses everything that you need on a single stat. However, it does introduce a couple problems. Firstly, Warlock Paladin multiclasses come online a little bit later. You need to be at least level 7 to get both smites, charisma-based attacks from Pact of the Blade, and the extra attack feature to maximize your damage output. Depending on your level split, you might miss out on the very powerful Paladin auras, or at least not maximize their usage, and you miss out on Paladin's extremely powerful endgame class feature, their capstone feature at level 11, where they do extra damage on every attack, basically upgrading your smites by 1 level every attack, and getting level 0 smites on every single attack that you make. What if we could build the character with all of those advantages and none of the downsides, getting extremely powerful Paladin auras, Paladin's super powerful endgame class feature, and making all of our attacks with Charisma so that we can use all of our Paladin smites, and Paladin's very good spellcasting, scrolls, and Illithid powers to maximum effectiveness. That's what we're going to be doing today. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Chris Dillon for the $2 donation, Oscar Dennert for the €20, Dorian for the $10, Mr. Ecke for the €5, and Josh Hobbs for the $10. Thank you so much, my friends. I really do appreciate the support, and it really does mean a lot. Alright, let's get to the build. This is a monoclass Paladin build, so we are of course starting as a Paladin, and I'm using Minthara as the example character here, since she's the Paladin of the party, but for race selection for this character, Paladin gets all of the weapon and armor proficiencies that you need, so your race selection is really very open for this character. You can choose whatever you want for flavor. Obviously, all of the normal standouts apply, like Githyanki for the Misty Step and additional skill proficiencies, which, since this will almost certainly be your party face, your character can benefit from very heavily, Wood Elf for the bonus movement speed, or Dwergar for out-of-combat invisibility, or Halfling to reroll 1s. Special mention to Gnome as well, because this character will have a maxed out aura of protection for +5 to all of your saving throws at minimum, and gains wisdom save proficiency from being a paladin, so Gnome's advantage on mental saving throws can make you entirely immune to failing wisdom saves, removing one of the main avenues through which you can lose honor mode and making your playthrough much, much safer. For our subclass, I recommend playing this as an Oathbreaker Paladin, because not only is it a little easier on honor mode, since you don't have to worry about not breaking your oath, we also, the whole point of this character is to maximize our charisma as much as possible, so Oathbreaker Paladin will let us add our charisma to damage twice over, increasing the damage output of this character significantly. For a more defensive take on the build, you can also take Oath of the Ancients. Oath of the Ancients gives you a lot of healing options, and the damage resistance, the spell damage resistance aura at level 7, and is always an excellent addition to any party, so if you want to be a more defensive rather than offensive version of this character, you can go with Oath of the Ancients. So what we select here mostly doesn't matter, because we're going to Oathbreak as soon as possible to enter Oathbreaker Paladin, but for a more defensive take on the build, Oath of the Ancients is possible. For our ability score selection, one of the great things about this character is that since we only need Charisma, we can get away with the incredibly greedy ability score split of 17 Charisma, 16 Dexterity, wrong button there, 16 Dexterity, and 15 Constitution. This is the maximum split that we can get at level 1 and gives us the fastest route, having the highest possible stats. 17 charisma and 15 constitution will work out very well. We want the 16 dexterity over 16 con for the early game, because until we get our charisma-based attacks, we will be using finesse weapons or ranged weapons, so you want dexterity to be able to hit accurately with those in the first couple levels of the game. Now, normally when I suggest this greedy attribute split, I say that it doesn't matter. Taking the odd numbers mostly doesn't matter for these characters. You could get a couple extra points in strength until you respec later on, if you really cared about it. But for this character, I actually do recommend starting your character with a 16, 14, 8, 12, 16 split, because the extra wisdom save can be really useful for a couple early game fights, and then respecking to the odd numbers once you get your first ability score improvement at level 8. So we're going to begin with this attribute spread, and then later on respec to the greedier attribute spread to maximize our ability scores. For our skill selection here, this character of course makes an excellent party face, since we're going to be maximizing our charisma, so make sure you have persuasion selected, and then whatever of these other skills that you want, and then we can put our remaining point into insight. We'll have good stats in all of our dialogue checks. If you're a Githyanki, of course, you can gain proficiency in the intelligence checks to be able to roll those as well, but this character makes an excellent party face thanks to its very high charisma. That's it for level 1. Let's move on to level 2. So, I've gone ahead and broken my oath and become an Oathbreaker, where at level 1 Oathbreaker, we get the Spiteful Suffering ability. This is actually pretty useful if you have the charisma to land it reliably. It's not the best action in the world, the damage is a little bit low, but advantage on attack rolls in the early game, especially if you know a fight's going to go long, can be pretty useful. So this ability is not a 0. Just normally you can't land it effectively because you won't have the charisma to force enemies to fail the saving throw. This build has high charisma, so you'll pretty reliably land Spiteful Suffering, causing enemies to take damage and gaining advantage on your attacks. At character level 2, we get access to smite attacks, which of course increases our damage output considerably. At this point, you will want to find a finesse weapon of some kind, anything that attacks with your dexterity, like a dagger or short sword, so that you can use that alongside your paladin smites. It's also notable, of course, that this character has 17 charisma, so spells like Command are just as good for you as they are for your party's cleric, because you have the high spellcasting stat to be able to land those reliably. So it gives you another source of extremely reliable disable available to your party. For our fighting style here, we're going to go with the defense fighting style. This character gets to have really excellent armor class with heavy armor and defense fighting style and a shield. As an alternative, you can use the protection fighting style. If your characters are going to be grouped up closely together, protection can be really valuable, giving you a reaction that can reduce the amount of damage that enemies are dealing significantly. Only worth it, of course, if you have a party composition that wants to stay within 5 feet of one another, but a very powerful class feature if you do. For our spells prepared at this level, we're going to make sure that we have Command, because again, normally paladins are not able to effectively land Command, but because of our high charisma, we will be able to. Bless is always good to have access to. You won't concentrate on it every fight, and most of your spell slots will be used on smite attacks instead, but having Bless available is always good for every party. Thunderous Smite is the best of the smite spells, and you can stack it on top of a normal smite for 2d6 plus 2d8 damage. And then you probably want some other situational spells that won't come up that often, but when they do, they'll be very powerful. Things like Protection from Evil and Good are very good for that, or Heroism to become immune to fear and immune to charmed. There's a couple early game fights where those immunities matter. Most of the time, these last spell slots will be used as smites when you're playing a paladin, but having the situational spells available that are really good when you want them is always very useful. That's it for level 2. Let's go to level 3. And at level 3, we get our some additional subclass features from Oathbreaker Paladin, where we can now gain control of undead. Don't underestimate this ability. This is actually a very powerful ability, and is the only way for your damage aura to actually affect other creatures. Animate Dead, the undead that you get from Animate Dead don't make melee weapon attacks, so your charisma-based damage aura that you get from Oathbreaker Knight doesn't work on them, but some of the undead that you can control do make weapon attacks, and so you can get a lot of extra damage if you control undead, keep them around with your party, and then they benefit from your paladin auras and do way more damage as well. Dreadful Aspect, again, this is normally an ability that you wouldn't use that often, because the save DC is quite low for most paladin characters, but because we have maxed out charisma, enemies will fail the saving throw and become frightened, and an AoE Frighten is a very powerful effect that will just instantly win you an encounter if you hit a bunch of enemies with it. For our Oath spells, we get Inflict Wounds and Hellish Rebuke. Hellish Rebuke is sometimes okay, because paladins normally don't have great uses for their reactions, but mostly you can safely ignore these two spells. Level 4 is where this build really comes online. This is where we get the feature that allows us to set our attacking stat to Charisma, making our character entirely single attribute dependent, or SAD, and powering up the character significantly. We're going to take a feat that you normally don't see on Paladin, and that feat is going to be Magic Initiate for Druid. This lets us learn 2 cantrips and a level 1 spell from Druid, but they use our Wisdom for the spellcasting ability. Normally this is a very bad deal. 2 cantrips and 1 level 1 spell that you can only use once per long rest is not worth a feat, especially because our Wisdom's very low, so we won't even be able to use these to their maximum effectiveness. However, there's a really interesting interaction with one particular spell, and that spell is Shillelagh, which, yes, is how you pronounce it. Shillelagh says that it sets your staff or club to become magical, causing it to do 1d8 base damage plus your casting stat, and it uses your spellcasting ability for attack rolls. Now, it's listed here as using your Wisdom, but that's actually not true. It uses the spellcasting ability of the class that you were when you learned the Shillelagh cantrip. So since we're a paladin and our spellcasting ability is Charisma, when we cast Shillelagh on a staff or club, it is going to use our Charisma for attack rolls and damage. So any staff or club weapon, we will be able to use cast Shillelagh before combat starts, or just as a bonus action during combat, and attack using our very high Charisma. This lets us maximize Charisma, get the maximum benefit out of our paladin auras, and the maximum save DC on our spells, and also makes us one of the best Illithid Power users in the game. Because of this cool interaction, we don't have to take levels in Warlock, so this character can be fully Charisma-based without having to multiclass at all. For our second cantrip here, we're going to pick up Guidance, because every party should have Guidance. If you have 2 copies of Guidance in your party already, then you can pick up something else. Note that these other ones will actually use your Wisdom. It's only Shillelagh that uses your actual casting stat. So you won't actually be casting anything like Poison Spray or Produce Flame, so I recommend Resistance or Guidance for your character. And then for your spell here, we can only use this once per day, so we want situational spells that are really powerful to have access to when you really, really need them. Stuff like Healing Word to get an ally up from prone, Create Water can be useful for some encounters, or Fog Cloud. There are some times when you would really want this. I recommend Healing Word because having access to it on your paladin just gives you an extra option when things start going wrong. You can bonus action heal your party members. Now that our attack and damage is set to Charisma, as long as we're using a club or staff, this character can power up all of their abilities and everything significantly, which is why this is such a cool option for a paladin. At level 5, we get extra attack, and so you can see that this character comes fully online 2 levels before a Lockett-in build, because that character would need at least 5 levels of Warlock to get extra attack and the Pact of the Blade attacks, plus 2 levels of Paladin to get smites. This character has smites already baked in, and has since level 2, is making our attacks based on Charisma starting at level 4, and has extra attack starting at level 5. So we don't delay any of our class features, and this character comes online much sooner than a Lockett-in, which is one of the really cool things about it. We get access to level 2 spells and level 2 smites. We also get Darkness and Crown of Madness from being an Oathbreaker Paladin. Obviously, we're not immune to darkness naturally, because we don't have the Warlock levels, but we can use like the Eversight Ring or some other way to become blind immune to take full advantage of darkness. Also just a very powerful spell to have access to regardless. And then for our prepared spells, we're going to make sure that we are picking up more situational spells, things like Protection from Poison and Lesser Restoration, because our level 2 spells are almost all going to be used on smite attacks. Magic Weapon is a totally reasonable thing to concentrate on as a paladin as well. This does work with our shillelagh weapons, and since we do have to use a staff or club, the +1 bonus to attack and damage can be pretty relevant because some of those weapons aren't quite as strong as the weapons we'd have access to if we were a strength-based paladin instead. At Paladin level 6, we get Aura of Protection, which says it gives a +0 bonus to saving throws, but this is actually a plus bonus to saving throws equal to our Charisma bonus, so at this level it is going to be a +3 to our saving throws. And again, I want to emphasize here that we haven't had to delay getting access to this aura at all because we're a monoclass Paladin, so we were able to both maximize its effectiveness and get it as soon as possible. At Paladin level 7, we get Aura of Hate, which will allow us to deal additional damage equal to our Charisma on every one of our weapon attacks. All of our attacks are going to be made with melee weapons, since we're using Shillelagh to power up our staff or club, so we are going to be doing 1d8 plus our Charisma twice over to every attack, plus any smite damage that we do, plus of course any bonuses that the weapons have inherently. This means that this character, even when we're not smiting, is competitive with great weapon characters for damage output, because we add double our charisma to our damage. So we're dealing a ton of damage on every single attack. And then on turns where we need to do burst damage, of course, we have access to smites to power up our damage even more. And we have extra attack, so we're attacking multiple times over. The power of Oathbreaker Paladin here is that we are maximizing our charisma, so we're going to boost that, of course, from level ups. We may boost it even further with story events. You can get it up to 24 if you take all of the story events that boost your charisma, which means that we could have up to +14 damage on every single attack when we're stacking our charisma damage from Shillelagh and our charisma damage from Aura of Hate. At level 8, we get access to our second feat, which we are of course going to use for an ability improvement to even out our constitution and charisma, maximizing our charisma bonus and getting additional constitution. Now, if you followed the ability split that I recommended, then you'll want to respec at this level, because we've had 16 charisma, 14 constitution, and 12 wisdom this whole time. Then we just respec to remove our wisdom, which we no longer need the saving throw bonus in, because Paladin's proficiency in wisdom saves plus Aura of Protection is going to give us a +6 bonus to our wisdom at this level, our wisdom save at this level, which is enough to pass most wisdom saving effects, and of course it only gets better as we increase our charisma further. At Paladin level 9, we get access to 3rd level spells, and of course 3rd level smites. Now again, our smite attacks are mostly our spell slots, are mostly going to be used for smite attacks. So we are looking to prepare spells at this level that that we might want in some circumstances. Things like Daylight can be used for some encounters in order to be very effective. Warden of Vitality can be good if you really need a lot of healing in an encounter. The extra bonus action can be used to heal. This is one of the most effective out-of-combat healing options in the game as well, though when you're a monoclass paladin, it is pretty painful to spend a 3rd level spell slot on it, so I only recommend this for emergencies. Crusader's Mantle is also worth considering on this character because we're an Oathbreaker Paladin. We have Animate Dead as one of our oath spells, and we get Command Undead, so we are able to have a lot of summons following us around. If you have a lot of summons in your team, Crusader's Mantle buffs the weapon attacks of all of those summons, and of course your own and your party members as well, and is a very powerful option to have available for your party. Elemental Weapon is also actually a pretty good enchantment. Again, only use this if you have ways to refresh your 3rd level spell slots, because you really want those for smites. But these are all great options to have available. Crusader's Mantle, only if you are going more of a summon route, but all of these options will come up in some encounters. Paladin level 10. We get access to Aura of Courage, making us immune to fear, which of course is very useful for some late-game encounters, especially if you aren't using a camp caster or don't have a character that can cast Hero's Feast on your party. Making your whole party immune to fear just turns off some of the most dangerous effects of some of the more difficult encounters in the game. So, again, don't forget to turn on these auras. When you level up as Paladin, you have to turn them on for the first time, because they default to off for some reason. Very important to remember to actually activate your Paladin auras. Then, at Paladin level 11, we get Improved Divine Smite, which is one of the awesome things that this character gets access to while still maximizing your charisma that almost no other character can use. Improved Divine Smite, it deals an extra 1d8 radiant damage on every attack, which of course improves the damage output of your character significantly. Not only is this a ton of damage on your normal attacks, it basically raises the level of each of your smites by 1 level. So even though we only have 3rd level spell slots, we're still making 4th level smites effectively because we have Improved Divine Smite. So even though we didn't multi-class with Sorcerer or Warlock to get higher level spell slots, our damage output on our smite turns is equivalent, and our damage output on our non-smite turns is higher. Since we add our charisma to damage twice over, our damage on our just normal attacks is going to be extremely high on every turn of combat. So this character, in addition to just having great burst damage, because we're a paladin making smite attacks, also has excellent sustained damage every single turn of combat. Finally, at Paladin level 12, we get our last feat, and we're going to take an ability improvement to maximize our charisma. Since everything this character does is based on charisma, we definitely want to get that as high as possible. If you've taken a bunch of story events or items that increase your charisma, it's possible that you might not value charisma as highly, and there are a couple other feats that are going to be worth considering. As always, you can consider Alert. This character does have 16 dexterity, so our initiative isn't terrible, but Alert is an excellent choice for honor mode no matter what. And another fun option is dual wielding. Since we're going to be using staffs or clubs, we will be able to dual wield 2 of them if we select the dual wielder feat. Shillelagh, when you cast it, applies to both your main hand and offhand weapon if you have 2 weapons equipped. So the dual wielder feat could let us dual wield staffs for a bonus damage and make offhand attacks with our second staff for the maximum possible damage, and that offhand attack will again add twice our charisma and everything to all of our damage, let us smite more times per turn. So dual wielder, depending on your the exact amount of charisma items and story events that you've gotten, can be an excellent option for this character as well, especially if you don't want the defensive aspects that having a shield provides. Alright, my friends, that is the build, but of course we can power it up even further with appropriate items and selection of Illithid Powers, because like I mentioned, this is one of the best Illithid Power users in the game, so let's talk about those. For items for this character, the most important thing we need, of course, is going to be a staff or club that we can use Shillelagh on. Now, in the early to mid-game, the best one of these is actually the humble, non-magical Torch. Torch is a light club that deals 1d4 damage, but then an additional 1d4 damage because it's burning. So if you Shillelagh it, it's going to deal 1d8 plus 1d4 plus your charisma modifier. Because it's a light weapon, you can actually dual wield these, so if you don't have a shield that you want to use in the early game, you can up your damage output by making offhand attacks with the additional torches as well. Another fun early game option for Shillelagh weapons is Nature's Snare. This is a quarterstaff that has a chance to ensnare an enemy every time you hit them. Normally, characters who might want to use this won't have access to extra attack, but since this character does, you can have 2 chances to ensnare enemies with your attacks, And Ensnare is a pretty powerful debuff, preventing them from moving, giving you advantage on attack rolls, and dealing extra damage. So it's, it actually doesn't prevent them from moving, but giving you advantage on attack rolls. Enemies have disadvantage on attack rolls, and deals damage every turn, which is a pretty powerful effect. So Ensnared on Nature Snare is pretty nice. In the end game, of course, your best bet is probably Markaheshkir, just like for every other staff user, because remember, we have 20 charisma, so we're really good at casting spells from staffs, and then we can use the Markaheshkir Chain Lightning or whatever, and then wade in and start bonking enemies. And because of how Markaheshkir works, we can gain the heat or lightning charges that it provides you, and then discharge them when we actually start hitting enemies. Another fun combination for this character is to use the Morning Frost, which does cold damage, alongside of the Snowburst Ring, which creates an ice surface under enemies whenever they take cold damage. So all of your attacks will create an ice surface, which enemies can potentially fall over on. And again, the save DC on this ice surface will be as high as possible because it's based on our charisma, so enemies will have a very good chance of falling over. Because this is made with melee attacks, you're going to want some way to avoid falling over, like the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, the preventing you from slipping on grease or ice, yourself, since these circles will be underneath you. But those are a very good set of boots for us anyways, because we do want to Misty Step somewhere on this character. We also want the best heavy armor that we have available at the time. One that I actually like specifically for this character is the Reaper's Embrace, because the Howl of the Dead cantrip makes us much better at hitting enemies. We have advantage on attack rolls against them with the numbed condition. And because we're a paladin, we want as many critical hits as we can possibly get. Items that improve our critical hit chance and critical hit damage, and especially items like the Killer's Sweetheart, which let us guarantee critical hits, are going to be incredibly valuable, because that lets us crit on our smites, so we're looking for that as well. The other thing that we want is to boost our initiative. This character only has a +3 with our 16 dexterity, so boosts to our initiative are really important. I recommend, if you're not going the dual-wielding route, to wear the Sentinel Shield, which gives you a +3 to initiative, combined with 16 dexterity for a +6. That's enough initiative that we can safely skip alert on this character, so the Sentinel Shield just gives you a ton of options, as well as giving you very high armor class. Between heavy armor and shield proficiency and everything, this character's armor class should be excellent. We have the defense fighting style as well, while dishing out amazing smite damage and everything in addition to that. Also worth mentioning, of course, as for most paladin builds and hybrid spellcaster melee builds, the Helm of Arcane Acuity can let us stack Arcane Acuity when we hit enemies, and then we could use a bonus action to cast Command with the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, so that combination, we all know how broken it is, of course, is broken for this character as well. Other than that, just generic boosts like the Cloak of Protection, very good for this character, gives you solid ability to increase your defenses, which this character has very good defenses already, so this could make them even better. But mostly you are looking for a good staff or club to base your damage off of, initiative boosts, high armor class, and things that improve your critical hit chance. Finally, it's worth mentioning as well, boosts to your charisma, like the Birthright Hat, is also very good for this character. Lastly, it's worth mentioning that this character makes excellent use of Illithid Powers, and since this is a Minthara build, at least this version is, you get a bunch for free. The reason for this is that the best Illithid Power users in the game are monoclass characters, because the Illithid Powers use the save DC rules for items and scrolls, so if you multi-class, you can ruin your save DC if you're not careful on the Illithid Powers. But monoclass spellcasters that also make weapon attacks make the best possible use of Illithid Powers. That way you can land the ones that have saving throws easily, but also make use of the ones that require you to make weapon attacks, and gain the maximum benefit of both. In the early game, I'm going to recommend starting with Favorable Beginnings, because hitting your attacks is good, and then go to Luck of the Far Realms, because making your attacks into critical hits can maximize your smite damage. Critical hit doubling smite damage, obviously, is going to be incredibly powerful. You also want Psionic Overload on this character, which increases your damage output even more, and the 1d4 psychic damage is not a penalty for this character. And then, of course, you're going to want Cull the Weak, just because it's broken. And then in the later game, your first priority is to hit Black Hole, because, of course, it's the best Illithid power and just wins encounters outright once you hit Act 3. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the RIZZADIN, this charisma-based paladin. I think this is a super fun and unique way to play paladin, and really, really powerful. You get all of the advantages of paladin and none of the weaknesses. The only thing that it constrains is your weapon selection, but as you see, you still have a really good set of weapons available. And paladin weapon selection actually doesn't matter that much, since so much of your damage comes from smites and abilities. This character gives you all of those things, amazing defenses from the paladin auras and your armor class, is one of the best at using scrolls and Illithid powers out there, and overall should be an excellent addition to any party, so have fun with it going forwards. As always, if you've enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave a comment and hit like. It helps me out a ton with the algorithm, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And of course you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 builds and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.